Hello and welcome to another Sprues and Brews video. Today we're taking a look at the brand new Middle-earth strategy battle game rules manual, which is contained within the new Battle of Edoras box for the War of the Rohirrim. So first of all I want to say a massive thanks to Games Works for sending us a review copy early to check out on the site. In this video what we're going to do is dive into the rules manual, have a look at how the game plays, and for those who've played it before, see kind of what is different as well. We've done a separate unboxing for the Battle of Edoras box, just because it'd be too big including that in that same video, and some people might be just interested in the new rules bit. So we've decided to separate them out. If you are interested in that, there is absolutely a video up today as well. We've also got a full written article over on spruesandbrews.com where we do a full big deep dive into the new edition of the game and everything within the Battle of Edoras box as well, with loads of photos of all the models and all that jazz as well. So yeah, super exciting time at the minute if you are a fan of Middle-earth. So yeah, there's not massive changes here. There are changes, and there are subtle changes from the previous one. There's lots of rules clarifications, but a lot of people were worried that the game was going to be something very different to compared to what it is now, and that is not the case. So if you are worried, you don't need to be. This is very much still the Middle-earth strategy battle game that you love, just with some of the rougher edges sanded off and made it a lot more kind of accessible as well, and there's a lot of the bookkeeping kind of taken out as well, and we'll see that as we go through. If you've never played the Middle-earth strategy battle game before and you want to get into it, maybe because the new film's out or because you're a big kind of Lord of the Rings fan and you want to start playing some awesome games, we will in this video talk through kind of how the game plays as well. So whether you're new or returning, hopefully there'll be something for you here. So yeah, it is a very similar format to the previous books. Obviously there's a lot of artwork in here from War of the Rohirrim as well. There's not really any spoilers in this book, but I will throw out a spoiler warning that, obviously there is some War of the Rohirrim stuff in here. Really most of the spoilers are in the other video in the box. Obviously we see some of the scenarios in the game, but just in case you haven't seen it yet, just thought I'd put a warning out there. But yeah, really nice book. Obviously with the kind of focus being War of the Rohirrim, the map in the front is of Rohan as well. I do wonder if, like in the heyday of the Middle-earth strategy battle game, where we got a new book with each film coming out, I think we are in the period now where every year or two we are going to get a brand new Lord of the Rings film, which is really exciting. It's I'm kind of in two minds. I'm really excited to get more Middle-earth in the cinema, but I also kind of hope that they don't dilute it a little bit. So yeah, there's potential here of lots and lots of cool Middle-earth stuff coming out every Christmas, which I'm 100% down for. I started collecting the game back when Fellowship of the Ring came out, and I remember going to Games Day when they first revealed this for the first time. So this is what, 22 years later, and yeah, the core of the game still is the same, which is really good. Now before we go on, we'll kind of chat about the characteristics, because that is something that has changed a little bit in this new edition. Now, we've still got a movement value. The fight value has been split into two. We've got the fight value, which represents kind of how good they are at fighting. So the higher that number, the better they are in a fight. And basically that means if there's ever a draw in the actual combat, the person with the highest fight value will win that fight. Now, at the time of recording this, we've not seen the army list as such, but on Warhammer Community they have shared that some of those profiles have changed quite a bit from the previous edition as well. You'll notice that we've also now got a shoot value as well. Previously that was just after the fight value. That's now its own separate stat. Strength and defense are the same as attacks and wounds. Courage is now a targeted number. So previously you had to roll the dice, add a number and see if it beat a certain threshold, which always involved looking things up and I could never remember it, and it's just a lot quicker the way it is now, where you just have to try and roll the dice over that value. So in the case of this example here, we've got a value of 5+. A new stat that has been introduced though is intelligence, and that basically represents how smart a character is. So there might be some scenarios where your warriors have to pass an intelligence test to, I don't know, find a trinket of some sort, or maybe there's a character passing by with the ring on, and by passing an intelligence test you can spot them and be able to charge them. So that's a nice new stat that's been introduced to the game. Might, Will and Fate still exist exactly as they did in the previous edition as well. We'll go into what they do a little bit later on, but the whole formatting of the profiles looks a lot nicer and a lot slicker. I think it's going to be easier to follow. We did get stat cards in the previous edition of the game, and I kind of hope that we get that with dry white markers so we can modify the stats there. Though I'm sure there'll be lots of third-party solutions for this as well. We can see later on in the book we'll see kind of what heroic actions are, but if you've played the game before you'll be used to all of this. What war gear they've got, what heroic actions they can do, any optional stuff that they can buy, any of their powers that they've got, and any of their abilities. We get a quick look at the battlefield. Now obviously in the War of the Rohirrim box we do get a battle map. Games still generally take place on a 4 foot by 6 foot board for a big game, or anything down to a 2 foot by 2 foot board for a small game. Lord of the Rings is a funny one, isn't it? Because while you can absolutely play it match play, it is just as valid to play narratively, and your battlefield could be any size really, to accommodate for that. So don't worry, we're not changing to the same table formats as 40k or Age of Sigmar. You are still free to use whatever size table you want for this, and obviously the mat in the box is quite good as well. So yeah, moving on to the rules themselves, as I flick through, we get the most important rule in Code of Conduct. Again, this is meant to be fun, it's meant to be a hobby. So if you ever get in a situation where the rules don't cover something and, maybe there's a bit of a disagreement going on, just roll off. On a 1, 2, or 3, the evil player decides. On a 4, 5, 6, the good player decides. Easy as that. It's not worth having arguments about a game, especially when they can't possibly come up with every kind of scenario in here to cover that. So I think it is always important to think about. Now, if you played with the Middle-earth, if you played other Games Workshop games before, you'll be used to one player doing all their kind of stuff. So they'll move, they'll shoot, they'll attack, and then the other player doing it. In Middle-earth, it's a bit different to that. There's a bit of a back and forth in each kind of like phase of the game. So if we just flick forward. So we've got various phases within each turn. The priority phase, the movement phase, the shooting phase, the fighting phase, and the end phase. Generally what will happen is that a player will do all their actions in the move phase, and then the other player will do all their actions in the move phase. And then the first player will do their actions in the shooting phase, then the second player, and so on. Which is quite different to most other GW games, and it means that, maybe player A moves up to the enemy in their move phase, but player B actually moves their models out the way so they can no longer shoot at them, meaning that it's kind of important, the order that you act in and how you do them, and then heroic actions then, like you interrupt that sequence to try and get something important done as well. So it makes it quite a fun game. Now, in order to determine who is going first, there's a priority phase, the players roll off, and the winner gets to choose who goes first. Now, previously they had to go first. In the new edition, they can actually pick if they want to go first and second, because there are pros and cons to both of them. If you want to charge somebody and you're close enough, then maybe going first will be an option. Or if you're a little bit further out and want to get into kind of cover, maybe you let your opponent go first and then you can move your guys out of the way. Now obviously there are heroic actions that interact with that, but it is an important kind of like decision whether you go first or second, which I think is a really nice thing. Now a lot of the other concepts for moving will be similar to other games that you've played in the past. Things have got a control zone around them, so you can't move into that unless you're charging. That also contains, kind of makes barriers that people can't get through. So you can use various defensive characters to kind of make choke points and bottlenecks where the enemy is going to have to kind of like charge into them and get through them if they want to. With this being more of a narrative game as well, terrain is more important. There's lots of rules for kind of like climbing and jumping and kind of getting behind cover and leaping across gaps. all that kind of fun stuff still works. And this all works very much the same way as it did in the previous edition of the game. Generally, if you want to do something like that, you roll the dice. On a 1, something bad happens, you fall, you slip, etc. On a 2 to 5, it's a success, and you get to the other side of the obstacle. And on a 6, it's a really good success. You get to go to the other side of the obstacle, and you can make your remaining movement. So all those kind of charts apply to all those types of movements. So, it's not as if you're looking up different charts to see what happens. Another thing that can happen in Middle-earth as well is that your models can go prone, either because they knocked down by a horse or something and they have to, or maybe you've decided to crawl to kind of keep hidden and stay out of sight. So with this generally having a smaller kind of model count than other games, it does give you a bit more degree of stuff to do within the game, which is fun. Shooting works very similar to other Games Workshop games. You've got a shoot value that you're trying to hit, and then you roll off against strength and defence to see if you wound them. Now, what is different in Middle-earth is that often you won't have a completely clear shot, and there might be another target in the way, whether it's a tree or another person, or maybe even somebody's horse. And because of that, the in the way rule exists. Now, in the previous edition of the game, based on what was in the way, there was different values to check against. And in practice, that became a bit cumbersome if, your arrow is passing a small plant, and then a tree, and then a wall, and then your target. Each of those would have different values you'd have to roll to represent the arrow getting past that. In the new edition of the game, it's really easy. On a 1 to 3, your arrow hits the thing in the way. On a 4+, it continues towards its target. And there might be situations where you're going to roll multiple in the ways because it's going past multiple targets, but it's always a 4+ now, which I think is a lot easier. Certainly makes it a lot easier to kind of work out what's going on from a kind of gameplay point of view. That does apply to like battlements and walls and stuff as well, so you can get your models in positions where the enemy is going to have to take an in the way test to see the arrow go through. And then much like kind of strength and toughness in 40k, to actually wound someone it's based on strength against defence. Compared to 40k, Age of Sigmar, stuff like that, it is generally a lot harder to wound your target, but you've got much smaller armies as well, so it's not as if you've got masses of troops. You can certainly play that way, but if you've got big armies, it's going to take a very long time. This is more, a smaller scale to those games, and I think more exciting for it at times. Fighting is, again, quite different to other GW games. What happens is that once everybody's in melee, where possible, you'll split them into kind of pairings. So one person fighting another one. Each of them will then roll a number of dice equal to their attack characteristic, and whichever side rolls the highest single dice wins that fight. So you see in this example down here, Aragorn rolled a 5 there, and the orc he's fighting rolled a 3. So he wins the fight because he's got the highest value. If they both rolled the same number, I don't know if I've got an example, here we go, good example there. If they both rolled the same number, then the way it would work is that the side with the highest fight value would get to win the fight. And then if that's the same, you roll off, and on a 1 to 3, evil wins, on a 4+, the good guys win. There's no kind of drawn combats as such, there'll always be a winner. The person that loses then gets pushed back, and if they can't get pushed back, they're trapped, which means there's a chance they take more damage. And then the winner gets to make strikes, and again that works much the same way. You roll a number of dice equal to your attack's value, and compare your strength against their defence, and obviously you've got chances of wounding them. Now obviously there's other kind of interactions and special rules and heroic actions that kind of go into that, but that's the gist of combat. So you will be doing lots of multiple kind of one-on-one fights across the battlefield rather than fast rolling dice like you would in other games, which again makes it feel a bit more kind of a smaller scale and personal, and it really captures the feel of these different heroes battling each other, which is really cool. When you're in combat as well, you can still have in the way tests, so if somebody's maybe fighting behind a barricade, again you've got to roll to see if maybe the sword hits the wall instead. Courage and intelligence works very much like you'd expect from other 40k, kind of Age of Sigmar and 40k and other games like that. You've got a value that you're trying to roll. Makes it much easier to do than the old way of doing it. One thing that you do have to bear in mind in Middle-earth, though, is the breakpoint of your army. So once you've taken a certain number of casualties, your army will be deemed as broken, and then your guys, there's a chance that they run away, and they'll test on their courage value in order to not do that. If a hero passes it, the nearby heroes will also pass it too, because they've been emboldened by that hero. So all that still exists in the game, all that's very cool. Intelligence we talked about earlier, that's got some interaction with some special rules and stuff. And then basically you've got a number of different unit types, so you've got infantry, cavalry. Cavalry are interesting in this one because you could have a kind of creature that you're riding that's got multiple wounds. You are able to kind of get knocked off your horse. You are able to maybe, in some circumstances, the person riding the creature gets knocked out and can carry on, which is interesting. We'll have a look at all the special rules for the various other kind of unit types later on in the book, but there's a lot more, I guess, granular rules for this kind of stuff. There's a good example with the cavalry where you've got a different profile for the warg itself. In the case of most like one wound mounts, if the rider's taken down, then the horse, runs away. Where it gets interesting is the fact that you could purposefully kill the horse, and then that would in turn have the rider get thrown off it and potentially take damage as well. For more kind of specialist mounts, there is the chance that they get separated and the mount can kind of act independently as well, while having to test if it runs away. So all that, if you've played before, is very similar. If you've not played it before, there's maybe some more rules than you would get in other war games. Again, I think that's really fun, and that kind of leans into kind of the feel of Middle-earth. And that's one of the good things about this game. It does feel like you're fighting battles in Middle-earth. Now, one of the things that is important in the Middle-earth strategy battle game are heroes. These are your linchpins of your force, and they've got some additional stats that your other kind of units don't have, and that is might, will, and fate. So might is used to do a couple of things. You can either modify dice rolls with it. So we mentioned earlier that the model with the highest fight stat wins if it's a draw, and initially that's just decided by a roll on. Might can be used to modify a lot of rolls in the game. So if we've got a good example here. So these two characters are fighting. One's rolled a 3, one's rolled a 4. A hero could spend a point of might to make that 3 into a 4 in order to maybe make it a drawn combat, knowing that they've got a higher fight value so that they'd win the overall fight. What they do need to be careful of, however, is that the person that they're fighting could use a point of might to make their dice into a 5. And basically this will go back and forth with characters spending their might until either both characters don't want to spend any more, or maybe they run out and can't spend any more. It makes it quite fun, a bit of a decision on when to spend your might, because it is only a limited resource. Some characters will have rules that kind of generate extra might for them. And that's not the only thing might can do as well. You can also use it to do heroic actions. There's a list of these that we'll see later on in the book, but basically they let you kind of fight out of turn. So maybe you lost the priority roll, but you really need to move a unit to get into a decent position. Well, with that, you could choose to do a heroic move action. That would let you move your hero kind of outside of the turn order, and then nearby models that are kind of with them can get moved along with that move as well. There's lots of different heroic actions, so you can use it to shoot out of action, to fight out of action. You can challenge heroes, so this is really cool. You basically call out a challenge to another enemy. You get bonuses to your kind of hit and your strike as part of that. They can accept the challenge and they'll get the same bonuses, and then whoever wins the fight actually gets a free point of might at the end of the fight. Or they could choose to decline and scarper off, but the hero that issued the challenge will still get the bonus if they fight them. The person who declined didn't. So again, that is down to kind of the ordering of who, do you want to call out a challenge? Because if you don't win the fight, there's a chance that they're going to be able to hit you a lot harder too. And it adds those suitably cinematic moments to the fight as well, which is really cool. There's ways of making it harder for you to be wounded with heroic defense. of making your strength higher with heroic strike. Will is used to cast various spells. So each wizard has got a list of spells they can use, which again we'll see a little bit later in the book, and they can choose to spend however many points of will they want to add a d6 to that casting roll. Now there was something called channeling in the previous edition where there was like a boosted version of the spells. That's gone now. Instead you just choose how many points of will you want to spend in order to cast the spell, and then if you hit the target number the spell goes off. You can also use will to try and resist a spell by basically beating the dice roll of the cast itself. And then finally we've got Fate. This is used to basically those moments in the film where, you know, Frodo nearly dies many times during the Fellowship of the Ring, and, you know, even though he's been stabbed by a cave troll, the mithril vest under his armour saved him. And this basically represents moments like that, where you get a chance of your model not dying. So you roll a dice after you spend your fate, and on a 4+ the wound is ignored. If you've got multiple points of fate, and maybe you fail that fate roll, you could immediately spend another one to try and kind of pass that fate again. Once you've run out of fate though, there's no way of saving those wounds. So it's a nice little kind of cheap death mechanic that I really like. Again, there are some ways of kind of replenishing that with some rules as well. We also get rules for the kind of more unusual stuff in here. So monsters fight a little bit differently. They can do a number of different kind of special attacks based on kind of, you know, what they want to do, whether they want to kind of smash through someone's armour or barge their way through to a better position, or maybe even pick up a target and throw it at one of their comrades. This is all very similar to how it was in the previous edition of the game. War beasts are things like mummoks who've got like howders and crew on them, who their momentum and their size means they just kind of trample through units and do damage. This was a bit complex and wordy in the previous edition of the game, and in this edition all this kind of stuff has been kind of simplified and spelled out. It still works in the same way, but the way it's displayed in the book makes it a lot easier to follow and look things up for those more kind of different interactions when they happen. Likewise for chariots as well, they're always moving, they've got momentum, so they've got to kind of like move in a stagger position, and again the book spells out kind of how they work a lot easier than it did in the previous edition of the game. One of the things that has changed a little bit are weapons and war gear. There was like special strikes you could do with some weapons in the previous game. That is all gone now. A hand weapon is just a hand weapon, and then when we have, you know, two-handed weapons and hand and a half, that all still has different rules. So for example, two-handed weapons, it's -1 for the dual roll, so -1 to hit basically, I guess. But when they're actually making the strikes to wound, you get +1 to that roll, which does make it a bit, you know, if you've got a fighter with only one attack and you've got a two-handed weapon, you know you're getting -1 to that roll, so it is kind of more likely that you're going to get beaten in that fight. So you might need maybe a guy with a spear behind you to try and contribute an extra dice to that fight, or if you're a hero with a two-handed weapon, you just need to be careful that you don't end up getting yourself beaten in that fight. Hand and a half weapons give you the benefits of both, where you can choose whether you want to use it one-handed or two-handed, and that gives you a bit of freedom based on who you're fighting then to increase that. But then you've got things with spear, basically lets you kind of support behind somebody else and add an extra dice to the fight, and then pikes, which basically lets you do that in an additional rank. Pikes do, however, have a bit of a danger inherent in them, where we mentioned earlier if you win a fight somebody gets pushed back, and if they're trapped they basically take double strikes off the opponent. Big lines of pikes is a way for your guys to get really easily trapped, so while you've got the more potential to win fights, if it all goes wrong you might start to lose your guys a bit quicker. Lances basically let you get an additional +1 on wound, but can only be used on cavalry that charged. If they get dismounted they've got to drop it because it's a bit cumbersome. War spears are basically a lighter version that then operate kind of normally when they're off the mount as well. Staff of Power, wizards tend to have those, and they generate a free point of will at the start of each turn. so that lets you cast spells and the like. Whips have got kind of a range of 2 inches, but can also be used as a combat weapon. Elven weapons basically mean that in a tie, the wielder of the elven weapon is more likely to win than the evil side. And then Master Forge is basically a really good version of a 2-handed weapon that doesn't have the downside but has all the benefits, so that's really cool. We get a load of missile weapons as well. Now shooting's a bit different in Middle-earth, where if you want to shoot at all, you've got to move below half your movement, and if you don't move at all, you don't get any modifiers to shooting. So essentially shooting's a lot harder. There are restrictions in your list building of how many bows that you can take as well. That is split between bows and ranged thrown weapons. So up to a third of your army can have bows, and up to a third of your army can have thrown weapons. Thrown weapons are cool because you can charge in, stop an inch away before you get into combat, and then throw your weapon to try and do some damage. So again, if you played the game before, a lot of this will be very familiar. There's rules for like banners that let your fighters re-roll their fights if they're nearby. War horns, which make it more likely that your guys kind of rally around. All that kind of stuff. One thing that we do see change with the rules is that there's a new type of shield introduced. So normally shields give you an extra defense and let you do a shielding roll. And basically that means you could choose to just fight defensively, you double your attacks, but if you win the fight you can't strike, but that makes it more likely that you win the fight and you don't get damaged. Light shields is a new option. They can still do the shielding, but they don't have the extra defense anymore. Obviously this is Lord of the Rings, and the One Ring is wielded by a number of different characters. There's full rules to represent them putting it on, trying to battle the influence of Sauron to take it off, and all the kind of the things that can happen with that. Again, if you played before, you know exactly how this kind of works. For magic, dead easy. The whole channeling thing's gone now, so it is just roll a number of dice based on however many points of will that you want to spend in order to cast that spell, and then each of them on their unit profile will have a target and a range for that. So we see a few examples of different types of spells here. One thing that you will note, the spell itself doesn't have the target value or the range in. That is based on the wizard. So, you know, Gandalf might be better at casting a certain spell than Radagast, so they'll have different profiles, which is quite good. It means that units can be kind of better suited at other things. If you've played any specialist games, you know, the Old World, Horus Heresy, Necromunda, you know, there's a lot of kind of special rules. It's much the same in Lord of the Rings as well, where these are detailed within the book itself rather than on the profiles. It means that if they've got some kind of like universal rules that are, you know, used by a few units, rather than having to replicate that on every single unit in the game, which would become a little bit cumbersome perhaps, they can instead have these kind of overarching special rules that they can apply to multiple weapons. Now some of these have changed a little bit, some of them are new. So Dominant, I believe, is a new one. So that means the model can count as a number of models when it's contesting an objective, just to represent how kind of like, you know, powerful or likely they are in order to take that objective itself. Again, this is all really kind of clearly laid out, and it's really quick to kind of look these up. Once you've had a few games, you will naturally remember what these rules do. There's a few things that were kind of written into profiles back in the day that are now special rules as well. So again, it just clears it up and makes it a lot easier for you to kind of like digest those rules without having to know them all. You can just learn the ones that relate to your army. Now there is an advanced rules section. A lot of these are kind of like narrative based rules, but obviously Middle-earth as well. You're going to have nice diverse tables, so there's rules for kind of going through kind of water, of picking up objects, of carrying other passengers on your horses. Some, you know, match play scenarios might have this kind of stuff in there, but for narrative play, when you're reenacting moments from the films and the books, there's definitely some cool stuff you can do here. Siege engines, again, much the same as they were, but again, like with the monsters and stuff, the rules are a lot clearer now, and it's a lot easier to kind of digest how they work and what they do and all that stuff. It does call out that the kind of siege engineer is now the warband leader, and the warband consists of just the siege engine, just to make things a bit clearer from army assembly point of view. And then we do get full siege rules in here as well. Obviously there's a lot of cool battles in Lord of the Rings. I would like to see them expand this further with maybe more equipment and more siege scenarios, but it's cool to see it included within the core book itself. Narrative play gets a big shout out, and for the previous edition of the game we got a whole range of narrative books. I'm really hoping that we see that continue into the new edition. A lot of those narrative scenarios you will be able to play. Obviously some rules will be different, but you'll be able to modify them in order to fit the new edition of the game, so I wouldn't worry about that too much. Match play arguably gets more of a change here, because army construction has changed quite a bit in the new edition of the game. So previously you had kind of army lists that were themed around, you know, the various races of Middle-earth, but then you also had legendary legions, which were more restrictive and represented a certain battle or a moment in the films or the books. All of the army lists in the new edition of the game are legendary legions. So say if you wanted to have an army representing the forces at Helm's Deep, amazing, you can take some Rohan, you can take the 3 hunters, you can take some elves, but maybe you wanted to have a Rohan army that represented the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Awesome, there'll be a different legendary legion that represents those forces. I know there's been some kind of grumblings about this one. I really like it because it means that you're recreating those forces that you're seeing in the films. You can't pick and choose the best kind of parts from all of them in order to make a really strong army. You're rolling with the punches with the kind of things that those troops had in the film, you know, at that time. This does mean that allies are now no longer a thing. We previously had an ally matrix that basically let armies that fought together, kind of from a lore point of view, were able to fight with each other. You could take them alongside your army, and then based on the ally matrix of how kind of close allies they are, it would determine whether you do or don't get certain bonuses. That is completely gone now. So that's been really replaced by the legendary legions. We used the example of the battle at Helm's Deep earlier, where you've got some elves within that legendary legion, so that kind of represents the elves that would be there anyway. It really does kind of help to stop any, I guess, gamey moments and cheesing out forces in order to get the best of both worlds. You get the benefits of the legendary legion, but then you've also got to roll with the downsides of that as well, and I think that makes for a more interesting game. And at the time of recording this, I've not seen any of these legendary legions. We haven't had the books yet. I suspect we will see lots more come in supplements in the future as well. Certainly if there's going to be new Middle-earth films as well, as we see new moments in those, they'll get added. I really like this concept. Maybe it's because I'm more of a narrative gamer at heart. I kind of took to them because I wanted thematic lists. But honestly, for match play, I think that is a good thing. And there's nothing to stop you using whatever you want in your own friendly games anyway. But for tournaments, it's going to mean that they can tune things a bit better as well. They don't have to, FAQ a character because it's got a weird interaction if it's taken as an ally or something. So, yeah, I think that's a much better choice. We do get a load of scenarios in here with just 6. Now, it does mention that if you pick up the match play guide, there's extra scenarios. I don't know if that's a reprint for the new edition of the game or if it's going to be the existing one. But yeah, we do get 6 scenarios in there, which is similar to some stuff that we've had in the past. And then, at the end of the book, we do get model showcases. Sadly, it's just for the new models in the War of the Rohirrim Battle of Edoras box. Unfortunately, there's no spoilers in here for new models that we might be getting in the future. There may be a sign to will we see the Helm's Deep set re-released. I'd really like to see that. But yeah, that is our look at the brand new Middle-earth strategy battle game core rulebook. I do have a full write for this over on spruesandbrews.com if you'd rather read it than watch it. We've also got a full unboxing of the War of the Rohirrim box and the new Forge World characters as well. And I suspect there's going to be a whole load of new Middle-earth content on the way going into the new year too. At the time of filming, we haven't had the army books yet. If and when I do get those, we will be doing full kind of analysis and reviews of those too. Hopefully around about the time the book comes out, but if we don't get them, as soon as they're available to buy, we'll have a write-up over on the website as well. But yeah, if you have enjoyed this video, why not give us a follow, give the video a like and tell us kind of what you're looking forward to in the new edition of the game. Have you played before? Are you a new player? And kind of, are you looking to get into the hobby? And yeah, like I said, we've got a load of content over on spruesandbrews.com. There's a load of videos up today. And then the new year, we want to have some battle reports as well. I've been frantically painting up a load of Middle-earth scenery. And we'd like to do some kind of small 500, 700 point battles on the website just to get some Middle-earth content up out there. But yeah, until next time, have a great weekend and we'll see you soon.